Hello, listeners, and welcome once again to the National Land Podcast. My name is Mac Christian, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at National Land Realty and your host for this podcast. Now, so before we jump in here, I just saw the video of this. I don't see a lot of the videos right away. They'll kind of sit around, and if you're watching the YouTube version of this, I'm sorry. I had just returned from a company trip to Florida, and my face got so absolutely torched. I didn't realize that. I feel like somebody should have spoke up and told me how bad my face was and just told me to stay off the camera. But I have this sunburn from the cheeks on down that I still kind of, you can still kind of see it there. But anyways, side note on the video for this, but this is not about me. This is about a very cool story. And we've spent a lot of time in the last few weeks covering topics about tariffs, about the Midwest, corn, soybeans, things that are impacting the Midwest in a very negative way. And there's a lot of pessimism about it. And I wanted to break up some of the pessimism. We have more content on soybeans coming at us, but I wanted to break this up a little bit. I didn't want it to get too heavy on the podcast. And this story is such a cool and touching story that I needed to share it. Now, before I jump into this, anybody listening, whether you give this 2 minutes, 3 minutes, go through the links of this and share it out, especially if you're on the East Coast. I want to get as much awareness to this farm as possible. So if you are listening to this, let's throw a little altruism out there and share these links out there if you could. So let's jump in. Sue Hudson is a agent from National Land Realty out of Maryland, and she helped facilitate the sale for this property, actually before she was with us, I think. And this is a tale of an owner now of a direct-to-consumer farm who the story starts out with a broken down car on the side of the road and a sign. And it doesn't get much better than that for anybody who's ever had a dream and encountered a situation that inspired them. This is just one of those. This is a really neat story. So sit back, enjoy, and thank you for listening. All right, we are here and we are live. We're talking with, well, first of all, Sue Hudson out of Maryland. Sue is a land agent with National Land Realty. Also, we previously talked to you about Sika deer, which was a cool conversation in a whole industry I didn't even know existed. And we're here with Wayne Cawley of Redemption Farms. And Redemption Farms is a true market-to-consumer farm out in Maryland. And we're here to talk about kind of this story, and Sue's familiar with it. And I kind of going to jump in here and want to learn about the industry, learn about the farm, and how you set this up. So Wayne, tell me how you kind of got into this.
It's a bit of a long story. I'll try to boil it down. In 2020, I was managing a fruit and vegetable operation for another farmer in Delaware. Was having a bad day one day, truck broke down, and out of nowhere, I got really frustrated, and something said, "Hey, maybe God's trying to show you something." I pulled my phone out, got on Instagram out of all things, and there was a listing for this farm, and I said, "There is no way that's what I'm supposed to be doing." And we prayed a lot, we waited, and one thing after the next, just I kept saying, "Buy this farm." And in the background, I've actually told two people this already today. I'd been farming under the name Plain Wayne Farms. It was kind of a joke that just kind of stuck. And I'd been convicted that, it just is all about me. I've got a family and everything. And that name didn't say anything about my faith, didn't say anything about anybody but me. And I had in the back of my mind I think the winter of 2019 already decided we should change our name to Redemption Farms. And we prayed about it. We waited. And I said, God, if this is really what you want me to do, you got to make it plain and simple. I'm not a genius. I need to know for sure. And there was a sermon on TV. It was COVID. We were at home during lockdown watching church on TV. And the sermon was about faith without works is dead. You got to take a step. You can say you have faith, but until you step, it's not real. And the pastor said the word redemption about every other sentence. And every time I was like, okay, I got it. And long story short, we made the call, got a hold of Miss Sue, and things just worked out from there. Now here we are several years later.
So tell me about, you ended up farming because of a broken down car.
I was already farming. So I grew up farming, and then I farmed full time with my uncle for several years. He had to go out of business for financial reasons in 2010. Through that, I worked for different, fertilizer ag retailers. I worked several different jobs, and then I was actually managing another farmer's produce operation in Delaware. I tried to buy farmland myself several times. At the time when we bought this, I was farming just a little bit of grain, and whole lima beans are a big thing around here. You probably have never even heard of them, but people around here are crazy about them. So we had a patch of whole lima beans we sold direct to people, and then I grain farmed. But I'd honestly given up. I tell people my wife must really love me because we had a house picked out. She picked out the carpet, she picked out the knockers on the doors and everything, and instead we bought this farm. We'd given up on buying a farm. We'd tried multiple times, but it just never worked out. So we were going to build a house on a piece of property that we owned, and instead we bought this abandoned apple orchard and property here in Denton.
And so what was it that kind of like that queued you up on this particular farm?
But the story of how I found it, obviously with saying, what are you trying to show me? And there it was, this listing. But it's funny how God works. I, for whatever reason, already had my eye on this farm. It always grew good crops. It's dry land, non-irrigated when it was grain farmed, but always had good looking crops. And to backtrack a little bit, two brothers, I believe they were Ukrainian, and they lived about an hour away from here. They purchased this. I believe they said they wanted to do a solar project on it, and that did not work out. Somehow they jumped from that to high density apples. I don't know how they made that transition, but they planted high density apples. And, it was the talk of the town for a while. I drove up past it twice a day going to and from work for a long time, and nobody knew what all the trellis was for. Then somebody stopped and asked them one day, and come to find out it was apples. I'd never even heard of high density apples. Apples in my mind were these big, big orchards, big trees. So it was all new to me. But given the circumstances, it's on the highway. It's actually two parcels. It's listed as one parcel, but it's two pieces of land split in half by a major highway. And given the fact that it had an existing apple orchard on it and lots of highway frontage, it just made sense. This is what popped in my mind. That would be a fantastic place to put a market and do, pick your own crops.
And Sue, tell me about your role in this story.
So the property was listed with our brokerage firm, and so when Wayne called our firm, I was asked to help him with represent him as a buyer, and that's where our relationship started. And Wayne told me his story, and even though I'm just there to help, walk a buyer through a transaction to a successful conclusion. I was immediately wrapped up into this goal and vision that he had for this farm, because it's a great goal and a great vision here on the Eastern Shore. I could immediately see what it was that he wanted to do with the property, and then long range, what it would look like in 2 years and in 5 years. So I was very thankful to have been partnered up with Wayne.
And then you purchased it. What was the year of purchase?
2020. We closed, I think, September 10th, 2020, I believe.
And Sue, from your perspective, it's probably not hard not to get drawn in for it. It's a good story. Like, it's just like, it's a good, yes.
When you hear, the transaction itself was very simple. It went very smoothly, no hiccups. But a lot of our clients have a story. They have a reason, and many of them are noble. So to be a part of that is definitely a blessing, and it's exciting.
And Wayne, so coming in, how much of this have you changed the landscape and the crops since the time of purchase? Because it sounds like you've done a lot.
So where I am sitting right now, I'm actually behind our market counter. When we purchased this in September 2020, it was chest high weeds and mud and everything where I'm sitting right now. The apple orchard was abandoned for some time, and I honestly didn't know if some of those apple trees were alive or dead. It was that rough. Since then, we brought the apple orchard back. We discovered that some of the varieties, weren't a good fit for us here, especially with what we're doing. So we have removed apple trees. We just, if you're familiar with grafting, we just top grafted several different trees. Our Honeycrisp never did anything, so we've changed that. We've tried to better tailor the varieties to what we have with the pick your own versus a typical orchard that would have large blocks of one variety. We need tons of varieties. Everybody has their favorite apple variety. That's one thing I hate about apples is everybody wants a certain variety, not just a good apple. But we've also planted peaches, cherries, plums, again, all geared towards pick your own, just very small plantings. And we have been doing strawberries. That's been a big hit, annual plasticulture strawberries. And then we follow the strawberries with a pumpkin patch. So it's next year will be the first year where hopefully we have something to harvest. I forgot about, we also have blackberries, but hopefully we will have something for people to pick themselves from, the end of April, beginning of May, all the way until about the first weekend in November. But we have changed it drastically. We have had a lot of plans to do even more and, different changes, and things come, things go. It's always, you're on the edge of your seat all the time trying to figure out what the next move is.
I got to ask, just at a personal level, you're the first person that we've had on this podcast that works with strawberries. And I'm just going to go from my climate here, from Arctic to hot every year. Strawberries are probably the most infuriating thing I've ever been around or tried to grow. How difficult is it to farm strawberries?
Extremely. So
they're finicky.
They are. And home gardeners ask us a lot of questions. You would think that I'm like a home garden center, but
right.
Strawberry plants themselves are actually very easy and very resilient. They're very strong plants, but to get a good crop of fruit is something completely different. And then to get fruit that people are used to seeing, the size and everything, that's a whole nother level. So in our region, we are not fully to the northern end, but we're really close to the northern end of a belt in the mid-Atlantic, where we grow annual plasticulture strawberries, similar to what they do in other parts of the country, especially say like Florida. But the difference where we are is in Florida, they plant just about the same time as we do. And then they begin harvesting about Thanksgiving, and they harvest those plants all the way through until about Easter the next year. We have a very short window between really, really hot. We get 90, 95 degrees pretty regularly, and then, below freezing. So if it's below freezing, you freeze your buds off. And if it's hot, the strawberries stop reproducing. So we have to plant our berries in the fall, make those plants develop branch ground so that in the spring we have a whole, arsenal of flowers geared up to open up in a short window of time. With that comes a ton of challenges because we have to protect from frost. If we get hit with a bad frost event, we don't just lose that week's, flowers like they might in Florida or something. We can lose our entire season in a night. It's really difficult and it's stressful. And I absolutely hate the month of April. And, sometimes early May, definitely March and April are stressful as could be. We cover with floating row covers. And, some years I may put them on and take them off a dozen or 2 dozen times. It's a couple of hours of work being hunched over, moving concrete blocks, stuff. They're difficult. But it is one thing that people will just absolutely beat the door down to come get fresh strawberries because you cannot get fresh, ripe strawberries anywhere other than, close to a person that's growing them. So,
yeah, because most of the time if you go to the supermarket, you're getting berries that were likely picked early and ripen on the transport, and are going to have, due to that, probably going to have lower sugar content, probably have different flavor, to where the fresh ones are just different.
It also, I try to explain to people with strawberries, forget there's an actual scientific name for it, but they will not ripen anymore once they're harvested. They may turn a little bit more red, but the sugar that they have is what they have. So in order to facilitate a berry being grown in California, put in cold storage for a week, shipped out to a distribution center, and then shipped out to the stores, and then sitting on, you're talking 3 weeks, 4 weeks of time it needs to last. So they breed them to be hard. They breed them a certain way, and they pick them right as soon as they can possibly pick them, versus ours stay on the plant for another week or so, and ours are bred for flavor, but they're softer. So they don't ship, they don't last as long, but it's night and day difference. It's the same with tree ripened peach versus a store-bought peach. It all comes back to logistics. When you have to ship something and it has to be able to last several weeks like that, it's impossible to get the same amount of flavor in it.
What about, okay, I know we probably beat strawberries to death here, but I'm also curious about pests, because you've got a temperamental plant, temperamental berry, frost, not resilient, and everything loves them.
Yep.
From bugs to bunnies to deer to what all do you have to go through?
So I wouldn't say strawberries are the most pests, as far as insect pests. They're not the most pest sensitive crop for insects. They are probably the most sensitive crop for deer. Deer absolutely love them. We have to have crop damage permits. Even with that, that's not enough. They come out at nighttime. We use deterrents this year because we have to rotate our crop around. We are really close to the woods on our property. We're I'd say 100 feet away from the woods, and I'm going to have to put up electric fence just to keep them out of the crop. And it is amazing. In one night, they can destroy, 1,000 square foot of strawberries just overnight.
I mean, in one night, I could destroy 1,000 strawberries. I could pretty easily. So, all right, I want to zoom out a little bit because it's fascinating, but it's just a kind of a cool topic. So when you purchased this farm, you have discussed it from the point of view of wanting to purchase a farm, but you've evolved this business model out of your farm of basically just direct to consumer. People shop at your farm. Was that the intent going in? How did this evolve?
Surviving was the intent going in, and I guess sometimes I'm prone to be the type of person that I'll figure it out as I go along. I do plan a lot of things out in my head and I run all the scenarios, but I'm just a on the fly type of person. You live and you learn. So I had this big plan that we would grow a lot of apples. There were apples here, and hey, that's great. You can store apples. There's all these different thoughts in my mind, especially from the background where I was growing a lot of cantaloupe and things like that. Managing the other business, that's a very perishable crop. Strawberries the same way. I thought apples would be amazing because you can store them. Well, as I've gotten into it, I've learned that, there's a reason why people aren't into certain wholesale businesses around here anymore. And I learned that the hard way. In 2022, I had an opportunity to lease an orchard in Bridgeville, Delaware, and we're still paying for that education. It was a tough deal for 2 years in a row. There's this, I try to explain to people, there's this economy of scale, and it seems like you either have to be very, very direct to consumer, very niche market for everything, or you have to be huge. It costs so much per item on a small scale for storage, for shipping, for things like that, and I'm not a multi-generational, large scale farm. So to get from here to there, you're talking a ton of money. To go back to strawberries, depending on the year and the crop, I can probably net as much on 3/4 to 1 acre of strawberries direct to consumer, pick your own, things of that much, as I could on, say, 4 or 5 acres of strawberries. That's the frustrating thing, is they are a very good economical crop, but they're not scalable. Versus soybeans. If you can grow an acre of soybeans, you can grow 20,000 acres of soybeans. It's very difficult to scale that up, because as you get bigger, you have a whole lot of new issues. Now you have shipping. Now you have labor crews. Now you have all these things, and it all erodes your profitability really quick.
So in a pick your own model, do you have to figure out in your head, like how many people that you would let in step on crop and damage crop as they're going through?
There's a common misconception that the U-pick is going to be a lot cheaper because they're picking it themselves, and sometimes it is. But say apples, strawberries, things like that, I figure in our pricing that they are going to waste a certain amount, and they're also going to consume a certain amount out in the field. And I'm not the type. There are people that'll chase them around and fuss. I just figure it into the price, and I want them to have a good time. I'm not worried about if a kid comes back with strawberry juice on their chin. I love it. I want to smile about it, not be upset about it.
I love that. So what's sort of your practice as far as your ag practice? Like, are you, and I want to talk about inputs. Do you practice organic? Is it regenerative? Is it just straight up inputs? Like, how do you sort of manage that? What's your sort of philosophy? We're
kind of out here in no man's land where we don't have a label for what we do. We don't fall into all the catchphrase categories. This farm, when we bought it, the previous owners actually intended it to be organic. They soon found out that it's difficult to grow apples in the Mid-Atlantic, and it's just about impossible to grow organic apples in the Mid-Atlantic. We just have too much pest pressure. We do get cold, but we're not cold long enough, and too much humidity. We've struggled with a lot of disease pressure. So we do use different disease management programs, but we also, I'm the weird guy that experiments with, microbial inoculants and things like that. And I've had some success and some failures, cover crops and things of that nature. It's a hybrid model. We use a little bit of everything. I try to use whatever tools are available from every toolbox. But unfortunately, because of that, we don't have a label or a sticker that says, hey, look at what we do. We have to spend a little bit of time. But the good news is, because we're direct to consumer, it can get frustrating when you have to explain for the 5th time, to a different customer what we do or why we do it. But they actually, instead of just looking at a label, can talk to me. Are your apples safe? Yeah, I just ate one off the tree 5 minutes ago. You know what I mean? I'm the one managing it. And I think that goes a long way, but it is an extra step that a lot of people don't want to deal with. It takes some extra time.
Yeah, well, I mean, use what works. Have you had to make any adjustments as prices of inputs have changed over the last 5 years?
Absolutely. It's unfortunately almost every single crop that we grow and sell here has increased in price since we started. Strawberries, we'll see what the crop looks like next year. We may hold the same price, but we have shied away from wholesale. You know what I mean? We've gotten more retail, so that's made up on the price average. Apples have had to come up. Our lima beans have had to come up. Everything has. And there's not a lot of resistance, but, I try to explain to people, everything I touch is going up, especially labor. We're in a state now that has $15 an hour minimum wage. So in order for me to have someone sit here at this counter for, 8 hours a day, we're required to $15 an hour, bare minimum. And just a couple of years ago, it was closer to 10. So it everywhere you go, it affects you. And back to the, by the seat of your pants, a lot of times I've gotten into it with something in mind, and then, well, that didn't work. We need to increase our prices a little bit or change this or change that,
The answer there is always have more kids.
So far, that's been more expense than savings.
That's true. That was always my joke. Growing up, it was like, nobody has kids around here. They just increased their labor force. Like,
yeah, there's a reason for that.
Yes, there is. I grew up working in a feed mill with my grandpa and my uncle, and that was like where I got shipped off for the summer because it was season. And I didn't even ask you what's the acreage on the farm?
It's a 38 acre parcel. 8 acres of it's wooded, roughly 30 of it's field, but it's split in half by the highway. So
Yeah,
it's
the
about
highway.
it's roughly 15 acres on each side of the highway.
Gotcha. And so tell me just overall, I mean, you talked about the building that you're sitting in right now. What was kind of your vision, and what specific changes, like you added? Okay, so you had an apple orchard that wasn't really functional, grafted in new apples. You got strawberries, pumpkins. As far as infrastructure, what did you change about it? Did you new irrigation? What did you change on the landscape?
So we've done a lot with planting peaches and stuff. We planted them on some existing trellis that required us to move our pole lima beans. So we had to purchase trellis. We did that across the highway. Fortunately, where we are now had an existing well. We had to redo the well pump, some different things, but we've had to put in a new well. We had no electric service where we are. So for the first couple of years with irrigation and everything, we had to survive off the existing solar battery array that it had when we bought it, supplemented with a generator. So that was difficult, coming here 10 o'clock at night, fill up a generator and running a generator 24/7. We survived it. Thank God we finally got an electric service. So that's been a lot less stress. But drainage was a big issue. We've done a lot to work on drainage, a lot of water leads and things of that nature, digging out ditches. Just a ton of different stuff. The trellis that was here already when we bought it needed a lot of repairs and maintenance. So it's like anything else, you don't have to look very far to find something to fix.
And Sue, I wanted to ask you about the region. Like, is this type of setup common throughout this area?
That was the missing piece I was waiting to talk about.
Yes.
The Eastern Shore has, for a very long time, I mean, we're going back 100+ years, has been known for its agriculture regarding vegetables, not just grain, but vegetables. That's kind of disappeared, and we're known for our small grain. But and the center of Maryland, over on the DC Baltimore side, on the west side of Maryland, is a large farming agricultural community where you expect to see these agribusinesses. Over here on the east side of Maryland, on the east side of the Chesapeake Bay, on the Eastern Shore, we've got several major arteries that take people west to east to the beaches, to the tourist areas. And so along those arteries is where you will find our farm stands, and they are very popular for these travelers, that they want to make sure they're carrying fresh, healthy agricultural products with them to and from their vacation spots. And so Wayne's is positioned perfectly. It is on the major artery between the urban areas to the west, the Baltimore-Washington corridor, to the tourist spots on the Atlantic Ocean. So they have to drive by his stand. So he's, what they say in real estate, location, location, location. And that's even true for a small agribusiness. So, but that's how we're situated here on the Eastern Shore. So.
And do you work with those kind of businesses often, Sue? Like, I know that you work with rec tracts and you work with all kinds of pieces of land. Is this type of setup is something that you see very often?
We do have clients looking for land where they can do exactly what Wayne has done. I mean, he's basically modeled what it is that people want to do. He was fortunate to have the apple orchard existing, even though it did need a lot of work to bring it back to health. It's a lot easier to start with something than nothing. So he definitely was in a good position with his farm. As far as new and upcoming farms, we do have requests, and there's several things that we have to help a buyer work through, things that they don't even think about. Access, ingress, egress to a major highway. What will the Department of Transportation allow? Depending on the size of the stand, are you going to be required to have a septic system? Are you going to be required to work with the health department because you have to have the clean washing stations, or not? So there's, the traffic counts, the zoning. There's a lot more to it than just I'd like 5 acres of farmland. And that's what we're supposed to do. My job is to help the buyer find what they're looking for, but to help them navigate the challenges of the things that they haven't thought about yet, to make sure that they stay within the regulatory guidelines.
How often pieces of land like this come up?
Not often.
I was kind of thinking it's usually a generational thing, right?
Yeah.
Wayne, I wanted to ask you, well, one, how many crates of strawberries do you give Sue to try to keep competition out?
As many as she wants.
But no, so in building this thing up, is it, tell me about your biggest learning experiences. What's the biggest mistakes you've made?
I would say the orchard in Bridgeville was probably one of the biggest mistakes.
The Delaware?
Yes. It again, it lost a lot of money in 1 year, and then it lost a fair amount of money again the next year. In the position we're at, we don't have generational equity to kind of pull from. So it's really made things difficult and in some ways hindered or stymied our growth for the time. And, everything happens for a reason. I'm not, crying the blues, but if I could do it all over again, I would probably not do that. Now, would I be right in my decisions? Who knows? The future is anybody's guess. But there's also been some things, that I pushed really hard to try to do as fast as possible. When you have a lien on something, when you have a mortgage coming, you want to get cash flow coming in as fast as possible. And some things I've rushed along just kind of feeling it was necessary. If I could do it over again, I would try to slow down a little bit and do some things a little bit more thoroughly. Again, would that be the right move? I don't know, but you duct tape something so many times, and could you have just fixed it right the first time?
Yes, that's a quote in our house is you get what you pay for, and you can only fix so many broken things in the house before you need to actually get something that's quality.
That's right.
So when you were going into this, you were a first-time landowner then going in, right?
Yes. Technically, I had gotten the property that I grew up in, an acre from my parents, kind of private partied that. But this was the first time ever making an offer. Had no clue. Yep.
And Sue, were you involved in that process? Was this like an FSA loan kind of situation, or how did you? I want to ask you about the finances, but I also don't want to dig into your personal finances to the level that you don't want to talk about it. So whatever you want to disclose, but did you go through a loan route to acquire?
So I will say this, that we probably would not have been able to purchase this farm if Miss Sue did not have the patience and the expertise that she did. I had experience trying to make offers on houses, and a lot of realtors want pre-qualifications. They want this. So I had experience with that. And when we did this, I remember I actually called her and said, "Look, I'm extremely busy right now. Is there any way, or is there any chance? Do you think that or am I wasting my time?" And she actually walked me through the whole process and said, we can make an offer, state that it's contingent on financing, state this and state that. And nobody had ever explained that to me. I thought you had to have it all lined up. So I would go to the bank. Well, the bank takes months. By the time the bank gets back to you, if they do, the property's been sold. So we were actually able to make an offer pretty rapidly because of her knowledge and expertise. We did not purchase this conventionally. We didn't have money saved up. Thank God we were completely out of debt at the time, but we had no money to put down on it. In Maryland, there is an organization called MARBIDCO. It's an acronym, Maryland Agricultural Resource Based something. But long story short, they have a program they call Mr. Biff. It's another MRBIFF is another acronym, but they will allow you to use that program as a down payment. It has limitations, but we fit within that. So through our farm credit office, we talked to them, and I kind of gave them the same spiel, like I'm working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. I don't have time to waste time. Are you willing to work on this, or are we wasting our time? And they did, and they had a good relationship with MARBIDCO. thank God it was 2020, so everybody was virtual. It saved us a mess of headaches. We just docu-signed everything and back and forth, but that allowed us to get the property bought. They financed it with the program loan that has lower upfront payments, lower interest, things of that nature that made it doable.
And Sue, I'm assuming that this program is set up to enable people who are new to market, new to agriculture, to get into the market. Is that kind of what the basis of this is?
They actually have many different programs. The Marbidco umbrella has many different programs depending on the type of farming you want to do, the size of it. They lower their interest rates because they're trying to motivate people to get into various types of farming, and they work hand in hand with a lender, which in our area is Farm Credit. So you still have that traditional experience of walking through the process with a lender. But this program has helped so many people who otherwise couldn't have got into agriculture.
I was just going to say, with the price acceleration that's happened nationwide over we'll say the last 5 years, programs like this are kind of indispensable because there is a generational handoff with agriculture, and there's plenty of people waiting in the wings wanting to get into it. They can't. Like, the prices are not something that people can jump into with current loan setups, especially with land loans. Like, FSA loan will cover at most 60% of land, or depends on what it is, right? But I mean, not the whole deal.
When FSA is actually open and not shut down.
When FSA is open and not shut down, yes.
Right. And the costs, the startup costs, you buying equipment. I mean, it's to get going as someone new in the business. It's just very cost prohibitive. So it's great that these programs exist. There's, I've worked with buyers who've gone into poultry operations with it, other boutique farming operations with it. They have, like a young farmers program for the young person who's just starting out. There is, like Wayne said, there is no family legacy land. And it's amazing how successful they are and how few landowners end up defaulting. Like, they know what they're doing. If they're going to work with you, this program, they know that you're going to be set up for success. So it's a great program. Sometimes it takes a couple months to get to the end, to be able to go to closing. Sometimes, depending on the program, sometimes it can take up to 6 months. So, you want to work with a landowner who understands the process and has some patience.
Or in this case, experience with that, growing up farming or
right.
being around it, knowing what to do. Now, as far as, we're talking, you just mentioned being successful in ag. Wayne, what does that look like for you? How many people do you usually run across your farm? Do you keep track of numbers on how much foot traffic you're getting, or?
Not necessarily. We use a point of sale for everything, so I can kind of gauge. It just tells me sales. It doesn't tell me how many families, how many people. I have a rough idea by the day. Not saying this is the right way to do it, but I ultimately just gauge everything off of sales because that's ultimately what's going to pay the bills. It doesn't matter how many people came. It matters, how much money there is to pay the bills at the end of the day. We have seen growth, but we've also seen change with the economy. We've seen price resistance, resistance in customers and certain things. And then in other things, it's still, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the economy is. So it's difficult to gauge in this. I like grain farming because I can do a trial and run out there with a combine and I know if it worked or it didn't. And what we do, you don't really know because especially with the pick your own, did you have a poor yield? Did you have a good yield? Did people just not pick it? Did they, you never know. It's difficult.
Yeah. Is that something where you have to plan 1 to even 3 seasons in advance to rotate a crop to something that is going to sell better, or or maybe move better or market better or anything like that, or maybe just to try something out? How do you sort of set that up? Is it just based on like, is it kind of a fly by the seat of your pants? Like, I don't know, let's try this.
It's there's a acronym called SWAG. Have you ever heard of a SWAG?
I've heard of whenever I've heard of that, it's like hats. It's stuff we all get.
No,
but you got something different in mind.
Scientific wild ass guess is what they call it.
Scientific wild ass guess.
We take note of what's going on, what's working, what's not working, and try to plan around that. But I don't know. We just planted peaches. We just planted different things, and we think this is going to be. But unfortunately, you plant these things, and some of these things take 2 to 3 years to come to harvest, and there's no telling. People might be over it by then. You just have to take a risk and go out and try it, and constantly edit it, along the way as it comes.
What's been your biggest surprises where you didn't expect to see growth and you did?
Strawberries, probably, and not to beat a dead horse, but I planted strawberries just because we needed cash flow, and they became something that people know us for. That it's just people go nuts for them. I was growing strawberries before that, but more of a wholesale, and every year it could be difficult to sell them, and we still run into that from time to time. But just the perception of it and the demand for it really caught me off guard.
How do you market
things that
go ahead, Sue.
One of the things Wayne's not telling you is his social media presence, his customer loyalty. I remember it was last summer, it was getting towards the end of the strawberry crop, and there was a weather event. I don't know if it was rain coming in or all of a sudden it was going to be extreme heat. And you put out that there was 2 days where those strawberries needed to get picked, or they were all just going to rot on the vines because of an upcoming weather event. And then that his post was shared. It was 485 times. And people came out, they were like ants on sugar, and they stripped his vines, and it was, and nothing was wasted. And it was the loyalty, because you can't, it's people wanting fresh food. And like Wayne said, they can talk to them directly. They want fresh food. They know exactly where it's coming from. They know exactly what it is as far as safety and health. It is, if food prices are high, when this resistance to these price increases, would a mother of 3 kids rather go to the grocery store and get a package of strawberries that has traveled on a truck over 1,000 miles? Or would she rather go out to his farm and have her kids pick it fresh, and she knows exactly what she's getting? And they cost the same. We'd rather go out to the farm.
Absolutely. And I was just going to ask you how you market your business. And I think Sue just nailed
basically,
it.
Yeah.
Right there. A lot of this is incorporated through social media. So a lot of the support for your business is really kind of community related, right? Where
absolutely.
And then is there a lot of communication, or are you just putting posts out, or are you keeping track of comments and responding and like kind of building that presence? Or, is it a conscientious thing, or are you just kind of just posting as is?
It's a little bit of both. I had previously used social media for, like I said, the direct marketing of pole beans and stuff, doing farmers markets and stuff like that. But it has gotten to the point where we use social media to communicate with our customers. We also will send, like emails to our customer list through our point of square and our point of sale. We use Square, but it has gotten to the point where we will announce what we have going on, or, what lima beans are. I think I have 3 or 4 people in the parking lot right now waiting to come in here to get some, but they are nuts for them. And I will just post a picture online and say, we have pole beans in the market tomorrow, and people will show up. I never expected that. It is partially conscientious because I do my best to reply to everyone, even when I've already posted the hours and I put all the information, and I'm still answering where we're located and things like that. But I want people. We're not a big farm. There are much bigger farms in our area. There are farms that have a lot more to offer for entertainment and things like that. I want to have that relationship because, that's what I have to offer. I don't have a huge play park or something like that, but you can talk to me if you want to talk to me.
Yeah, and I mean your page. What, you have 4,000 followers or 5,000 followers?
We actually just hit. I didn't even know it. Somebody said it. We hit 5,000. I'd never, when we first got 100 people, I thought, good grief, this thing is taking off. But
and then did you start social media around this right away?
Yes, because like I said, I had experience with it before from other things and seeing, where it's a tool. I had no idea that it would be the driving factor, for our marketing. But again, seat of your pants, you shotgun approach, throw a bunch of things out there and whatever works, invest in that. And, we've done we have various platforms of social media and, listing things that we use, but whatever is seeing the most response, instead of worrying about what's not working, we just try to keep pushing into that one thing. And, we'll keep a presence everywhere, but right now Facebook has been the biggest thing for us. So we just keep trying to utilize it.
Is this a whole family operation, or are you doing the farming during the day and then doing the social media at night? Like, what's that look like?
It's my wife and I. She helps a lot with social media. She helps, with things in the market. A lot of the field work I'm doing myself. I don't really have, at times I have a crew and at times I don't, but I also have an off the farm job. So it is difficult. Sometimes you have to ignore people for a little while on social media because you're with your kids and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's 3 full-time jobs. You got farm, family, and other work. It's that's a busy thing. As far as planning for the future, what do you have sort of set in mind for future plans for Redemption Farms?
I wish I could tell you that. We've had a lot of plans, and here in the past 2 years, there have been a lot of curveballs. We're waiting to see how we have like an ABC plan. If this works out, then this is how this will go. And if this works out, then this will go. And a lot of that is outside of my control. There are some off the farm employment opportunities that would change how things go. When we first bought this, we planned on building a big market on the other side of the highway, year round. And then post-COVID prices have changed all that. So I'm just, trying to adjust little by little. We're not really, I have 5 and 10 year outlooks, but nothing is set in stone just because of how volatile everything is. Just try to play it by ear.
I think that's kind of how you have to operate just in general, just to be able to have a pivot in mind. And then maybe that's not even the one you go with.
Absolutely. 2 or 3 of the things that I'm doing off farm right now, I never envisioned, the one was in the past 6 months, it was completely unthought of, but opportunities arise and you have to, just like this farm, you have to be willing to at least investigate it.
So what would your word of advice be for anybody looking to do what you were doing?
You miss every shot you don't take. So would I try to caution people? There's a lot of people, homesteading is the key word right now.
It's a trend right now. Yes.
Yeah. So it sounds good, but do you want to be spending your Friday nights working till 11 o'clock? How badly do you want it? If you just want to raise some chickens and have a garden, then do that. But the moment that you get in debt over it, it's a business. So yes, you have to love it. You do, or you won't. There's not enough profit in this business to be worth it as a business solely. But you also have to treat it as a business, and you have to be business minded. You have to be willing to, shut down sometimes. Sometimes you have to be willing to cut the cord. You have to be willing to say enough's enough. You have to have boundaries. If not, it will eat you alive, because this isn't a 9 to 5, that you could spend your entire life doing whatever and get nowhere. You have to have a business mindset and go into it with that mindset that you're here to, whether it's equity or profit, that's your goal. You're not here as a hobby. There's a lot less expensive hobbies than farming. But again, I think it comes back to the, how we've come full circle from thinking this or thinking that. Don't go into it thinking that it's going to work out the way that you want. Go into it with an open mind and be willing to change and pivot as things dictate.
You touched on something really strong there, where like there's a difference between wanting to homestead or farm, and like there's the work, and then there's the sort of like Instagram imagination of what I think it's going to be. And it's like, yeah, you're not going to be out there taking selfies all day looking glamorous.
Absolutely. And a lot of people don't understand. You know, one of my best friends, he helped me build this market. He's with me all the time, helping me out. And I think it was like 11 o'clock at night on a Friday night. I was putting peaches out on a wagon, you know, restocking, doing whatever I hadn't got done that day. He said, this is the stuff that you ought to put on social media, the stuff that nobody sees. You know, it's the truth. There's a lot that goes into it. It is a ton of work, and it's always there when you're, you know, up and going. It is always there, especially things like livestock. You know, they're living and breathing 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That's why we have not gotten into that yet, because, you know, I have a wintertime, very demanding job, and I don't know how to make it work. Things like that you got to think about, because you're not what you see on social media. I used to laugh and, you know, nickname people Facebook farmers, because it looks like fun. But the reality is it's not all fun and games. There are rewarding moments, but it is a job. It is a business. Get that through your mind when you get into this. If you want a recreational property that you play around in, then get a recreational property. If you want a business, you bought a business.
Sue, same question to you, since you work with multiple land buyers, or if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think what Wayne said could apply to any venture someone wants to get into. Is you've got to go in with your vision and energy, but with your eyes wide open, counting all the cost. That it does yield very good things, but remembering what it takes to get to those good things, because nothing happens by itself. You know, the energy in, energy out. If you want good results, you've got to be willing to put in the good effort.
Wayne, I want to give you an easy out, because I know that you have business to run. But I want to give you a unfiltered plug on ours, how people can find you. And I'll also have links and information for anybody in Maryland to be able to find you. But yeah, give us any details you want. Shameless plug.
So Redemption Farms is the name, Redemption Farms LLC. Most social media, it's Redemption Farms MD, like the initials for Maryland. We are currently having some really weird hours. We're Monday through Friday, 3:30 to 6. Sometimes we have a hard time being open by 3:30. But Saturday, 10 to 6, we're closed Sundays. In a typical year, we open the end of April, the beginning of May, and stay open until about the second weekend in November. Hopefully next year we'll have a whole gamut of crops throughout the whole year. Our goal is to have something to pick all year long. That's our market. That's our niche. There's produce stands all up and along the highway. They're like litter. They're just covering the highway around here. So anybody can go buy sweet corn or something, but the actual on the farm experience is kind of unique. So that's our goal, is to have something year round that people can get out of the car, stretch their legs, and actually harvest the product themselves.
Excellent. Well, Wayne, I appreciate your time. Like I said, I know it's time away from the business, so I appreciate the time that you've given here. And such a cool story. I mean, it's like I want to go to Maryland and I need to make an excuse to get out of Idaho and go and get out to your farm there in Maryland.
Well, we can trade trips. I love Idaho, so you come over here, and then we'll
get out here. Get out here. We'll go running around. But yeah, very much appreciated. And thank you for your time.
Thank you all very much.
This concludes this episode of the National Land Realty Podcast with Sue Hudson of Maryland, one of our agents there, and Wayne Cawley of Redemption Farms. I will be including all kinds of links to Redemption Farms in here, as well as a link to their Facebook page. Be sure to share this one. This is a really cool one. I want this one to get out there. I want to give as much publicity to this family as I possibly can. So thank you. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, and where possible, review it. We can always use the reviews. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next episode.